Let's find places. Hold on.
I gotta go back in here so I can find it. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 16, 2022. Welcome to the DJ Dani Show on HamiltonRadio.net, stream HR1. In our home studio again tonight. We are thankful to be here, excited to have another show on a Wednesday. So I want to thank Chris again for booking that. We want to introduce our amazing guest tonight. Everybody knows a little bit about you with the psychology and also the counseling degrees that you have in different schools and universities you've went to. So I want to welcome Richard Yahn here with us, a mental health therapist. So thank you for taking your time to be here today, or if you had to, schedule over clients and everything like that.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here and share about mental health and answer some questions and just kind of dive right in today and on such a beautiful day too.
Yeah, it's amazingly gorgeous outside.
Yeah,
I didn't know the weather until I went outside and I was like, oh, still wearing my winter jacket. It's okay.
Yeah, right.
So, Richard, I wanted to get a little bit started, maybe even when you were younger. Where do you feel like you had gotten the interest to just want to either help people or go to school for either counseling or psychology? Like, where did that kind of fit in your life with your spectrum?
Yeah, it was rather funny. From the ages of 3 to 15, I wanted to be a marine biologist.
Wow.
And, yeah. And then the more I learned about the ocean, the more terrifying it is. But in a positive way. I'll always have that love. But I took a psychology class when I was 16 and just fell in love. I for some reason I always knew that marine biology wasn't going to be my career.
Okay, your go-to was something else.
Totally. You know how like when you're growing up, everyone asks like, so what do you want to do when you grow up and all of that? Mm-hmm. It was a great go-to, even if I wasn't 100% sure. And then I took that psychology class and I was like, that's it. I knew from that moment, from the first class, I just fell in love and went head over heels and took as many psychology courses as I could. And it was just fantastic. It also, I had a phenomenal teacher too.
Okay, so that helps you learn a lot.
Yeah,
definitely. Now, within the psychology though, where did the counseling then come from?
Yeah, so with a psychology degree, you can do a lot of things, but it's also very generalized, for an undergrad in psychology. And when you think about it, psychology is really in everything from the color of your trash can to the detergent you buy, with marketing and things.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Never thought of it like that.
Absolutely. Even when you watch interviews, when you watch The Bachelor, for example, they have therapists and psychologists behind the scenes working. They do rather more manipulative type work on like The Bachelor, for example, which is rather unethical, but is what it is for good TV.
Yes, reality.
Exactly. And so if you really want to progress, you have to get a master's. And you can get that in social work, counseling, therapy. You can get a doctorate in psychology as well. There's a few different types, counseling, psychology, clinical, research, as well as like school psychology. And so there's a lot of broad areas that you can go. I love talking with people.
Okay. So it was like that type of one-on-one connection that you kind of fell in love with as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where you wanted to then go to school for counseling,
mm-hmm.
part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did some marketing psychology for a couple of years. I did sales, advertising, that sort of thing. And then I just sat there and I was like, no, I really want to do counseling. And so I found the right program and jumped right in. And it was funny, I actually applied and started within like 2 months of each other. It was a very almost like impulsive thing, but I just knew it was right. It was the right timing.
Yeah, it felt like it was home.
Yeah, 100%. And then I remember like my first day in my master's program, I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. I hope I can do this. Like, It was really crazy. I was like, what did I just sign up for the next 3 years? Because I went back after a few-year break from being in school.
Oh, okay. So you had taken a break in between. Were you now that break was that when you took that break in between, was that for you to kind of figure out what would be your next course, what your next step was into the career you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I graduated a year early from my undergrad
Okay.
because I did some college while I was in high school. So I was a year ahead.
Yes.
Um, and I really liked LaSalle, but I wasn't huge on the type of grad program they had. It was very research based. Um, Great program. I worked in the master's department. Loved it, but it just wasn't the right program for me. So I took some time to kind of figure it out, and then Cairn University just rocked.
Okay. And I was going to ask you as well because you went to two different schools, correct, for your degree and I think your bachelor's degree. So the first school that you had went to for your counseling was
Yeah, so I went to actually Bucks County Community College for during my high school. Uh,
okay.
and so I graduated and almost had my associates when I graduated high school. So I stayed an extra year to finish that off. And I mention that because Bucks has a phenomenal psychology program. The teachers there are amazing. Actually, their classes were harder than my undergrad at LaSalle. When I took there, they had me redo a couple because they wanted them in their, you know, uh, at their school. They just
Yeah, like their speed there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and ironically, it wasn't nearly as hard as what I had at Bucks. Great program, but the teachers, they wanted you to know this stuff. So it gave me a really solid foundation of the book knowledge from both of those programs. And then when I did my master's at Cairn University, it was less book focused and more heart focused. Like how do I really get to the heart?
Okay.
What are the issues? How do I connect with people in a professional way? How to do those counseling skills specifically. And so you really leave that program knowing how to counsel rather than having to. I mean, there's always a learning curve, 100%. My first day counseling versus several years later now is
Sure,
completely
yeah.
different. But
Well,
I
first
definitely
day you probably were like nervous and stuff like that, or make sure you did everything correctly. You also get timed, right? You are timed with your sessions, so that probably affected, your first day. And I don't know if you have like stress or anxiety on top of that, so that was probably not,
yeah.
that
Well,
awesome at that time.
yeah, I'm one of those people that like jump right into things. I remember like when I got my driver permit, my mom threw me the keys and said, "Okay, well you're driving home." And if you're familiar with the area, it was in Bensalem, and so I had to drive home during rush hour on two highways,
Oh,
and there was a thunderstorm, and it was my first time kind of
oh,
doing
good
that.
job, Mom.
Yeah. And then after that, driving was a piece of cake because I'm like, well, I already did that. And if you're wondering at home, like, oh my gosh, like what was his mom thinking? Like that's just was our style growing up. We just jump right in. I had a lot of practice growing up driving, different types of equipment, lawn tractors and real tractors and all of that. So it wasn't this foreign concept. But yeah, sometimes you just have to jump right in. And yeah, my internship. So the track I did, I'm pre-licensed. I'm about to be licensed. I
Okay.
just have to submit some paperwork and finish my boards exam and things like that. But I have all my hours. It's a really long, convoluted process that I won't bore you with the details. But so I still have some supervision. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's been amazing. As a therapist, a lot of times it can feel like lone wolfing it. And I'm a part of a practice that's kind of like an umbrella. So we're all individual clinicians. We can set our rates, our hours, everything. But we have like this comfort of community, of other clinicians that we can refer to, people that we know well. And I'm really honored to be at a place, Newtown Therapy, where I can refer to any clinician knowing they're going to be fantastic. They're just really solid, good people and also very good clinicians too. And so it's really nice to have that community. And if you're having an issue, we do kind of like monthly or even weekly supervisions where we all get together as a group and talk about cases that are challenging. So you're not just getting the mind of one clinician, you're getting the mind
Wow.
of many.
That's really amazing. That
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of in their shoes, just a little bit to understand how they're getting a feel of the whole situation that maybe you didn't know about. And now, you're all taking a part in trying to find out what's the result. What can you do in the end? So that's actually really exciting. That's kind of like detective work almost.
Yeah, it really is. It's very interesting, kind of investigative in a caring way. You really learn to like live vicariously in some ways to really understand, where this person's coming from, what their life is like, how they view the world. Is there anything kind of askew? What lens are they looking through? A lot of times we feel like, are we of value or worthy? And then we look at the world through that lens of, does this say I'm worthy? Does this say I'm not worthy? Do I feel judged?
That's social media, and that's like the economy, right there in a ball.
Yeah, that comparison game is so dangerous. I love the quote of the fastest way to steal joy is to compare.
That's a beautiful quote. Who wrote that?
I don't know.
Okay. It's just a quote you remembered, but it's nice because you probably use it a lot in your sessions.
Yeah.
Just to help ease the mind for some patients that you have as well. Do you consider, are they patients or they're patients, right?
Yeah. So that's a really great question that you asked too, because technically, yes, they are patients.
Yes.
But I use the term clients a lot.
Clientele. Okay.
But sometimes because it's kind of like more of like that professional component. It doesn't feel as doctory, but at the same time, I do remind my clients that they are patients, and I'm going to prescribe things that aren't fun or really suck or are difficult.
You have to. Yeah,
like homework and things of that nature to help them change their lives to accomplish their goals. And I have to remind them sometimes that, hey, like I'm technically kind of like, it's like a doctor patient kind of relationship. Your doctor says, hey, take this antibiotic, and you'll feel better in a week. It's like, hey, if you want to achieve these goals, these are ways to get there. And of course, it's a completely collaborative experience. I want them to be on board. I want them to feel a part of it. And a lot of the times it's their ideas, and working through them, I give them multiple options and different ways of doing it. It's a very together process. And at the end of the day, I'm just leading them down a path and walking with them.
Yes.
They're the ones that actually have to do the hard work and the heavy lifting. I can just kind of guide them and show them the how part. They have to do it for themselves, though.
Well, they would have to. I mean, there's ways that you could try to help depending on the situation, but you can't do it for them because they're not going to learn anything in the end. Like, it's like, why am I going to if, I'm not learning anything kind of situation. So you have to give them, ease their mind to know that they'll be okay with whatever situation it is. And then from there, as you said, walk them down that path and just be there for them, like guide them, their guardian angel kind of thing,
Yeah, I try.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. And sometimes, I have a client come in and they're like, well, the thing that we talked about not doing, I did that thing. And so many times. And I'm like, hey, I'm here with you. We'll walk that path together.
Yeah.
We'll talk about like how much of a disaster something might be. And they're like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm like, okay, I'll be here next week and we'll process through it. And that's okay too. It's a completely non-judgmental and a completely safe place to talk about thoughts and feelings. And, and it gets really interesting too. Like when someone passes away or is pregnant now, I wait to see what their reaction is, because it's not always sad or happy or what you would expect. Sometimes there's relief. Sometimes it's a burden that's been lifted. An ailing parent who's had a long struggle. It's like, as sad as I am, I'm just so happy they're at peace now.
Yeah.
It's
like different things that you have to kind of listen to and get a better feel for as well.
Yeah. And that kind of carries over into personal life now in a lot of ways, of like really getting to see the in-depth reality of what people go through. And I think the biggest thing, I wish all people could see, the world from space, I think would be a very collective thing.
Compared to the lens you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. That we're all on this rock together and we forget that. And then second, to watch, I wish people could just watch a group of counseling sessions to know that we all have the same fears so often. They might be a little bit different or tweak here or there, but at the end of the day, no one really knows what they're doing. We're just kind of figuring it out as we go. that we're all kind of striving to learn how to be confident and to do the things that we want to do. And, and so many, insecurities that we have is really, you're describing everybody. Very, very rarely, even confident people have those moments.
Correct. I was going to say that they have the biggest moments because you wouldn't know. And then, it happens.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to destigmatize therapy and mental health and all of that, because we're all struggling through something. Everybody has their thing. And I think the pandemic really revealed a lot of that. And I've always said that the pandemic didn't really cause any problems,
okay.
Other than the obvious where people are getting sick and dying and things like that. But in reality, it just revealed the problems that were already there and exacerbated them.
Yeah, you're very, very true and very right about that, because to put it in a point of view, basically it affects all of us, and we really didn't know that until, it happens. It also was a lot of kind of common sense that fell into it that we didn't also, think of. We all get distracted, being the type of people that we are. So it's kind of nice that we have a step back. And I feel like a lot of it also was, to myself, it could have helped a lot of families that didn't have a lot of time together. So I feel like a lot with the pandemic, maybe it happened because some people had long hours, some people were flying, some people couldn't see their loved ones. It could have been a whole bunch of different things that it happens. And I'm sure a lot of people, grew bonds with that too. They got a chance to see the person that they haven't seen maybe in a couple of years or anything with that. But I was going to ask you, for the pandemic yourself, how did it affect your career? How did it affect your business?
It was wild to see kind of behind the curtain of so many people. I work way overtime for what a therapist typically sees between 20 and 25 clients is considered full time. I see over 30 weekly. I love it.
You know all of them and each storyline where it's going to go to next.
Yeah.
Versus like picking up a new one. But yes.
Yeah. Their family structure, who's alive, who's not alive, kids, all that, and all those relationships and everything else. And, it's a lot to manage, but I absolutely love it. With the pandemic, it was rather interesting. I started at Newtown Therapy, and about 8 months later, we had the pandemic. Yes. And so I went from being in person, building a caseload, and thank you very much, Devin. I appreciate that. I was building a caseload as you traditionally do. And then all of a sudden we go all virtual. And so my caseload remained about the same. And then a few months later, people were requesting to be in person. They're like, I'm so tired of looking at screens. Can we meet in person? And so we did so safely, following all the guidelines that we could. And it was people that, weren't risky. They weren't like going to underground clubs in Philly still during the pandemic and things. So we kept it really safe. I'm like, if you're at home all the time and quarantining, like, of course we can meet.
Okay. So that was kind of affected though at first, where you wanted to keep your distance as a certain, mental health therapist. Because you also, did you get you knew a feel already for what your clientele had out there, right? Like what backgrounds or where they used to go to, or if they like to go clubbing and, like alcohol abuse or anything like that. So that was a huge part where you also had to probably look and depend on each client, right? And be like, oh, this one I have to see, is it okay for them to come in, or do they want to do video through Zoom or something like that?
Totally. Because I not only thinking of myself, but of the other clients that would be coming in after them.
That's true. Or your business, right? Like all the other people that work there too.
Yeah. And wildly enough, I was the first person in my office to go back in person. I went back in person about 2.5 months after March.
Okay.
I guess it was March 13th when everything kind of shut down. I was the first back in person, just seeing a few people.
Did you feel comfortable then? Were you like, okay, or were you still at ease?
Yeah, I felt pretty comfortable. We followed all the guidelines, distance, masks. I had a really great, and still do, air purifier in the office as well. We had like airflow, all that kind of thing. So we did, a lot of things to mitigate risk, all the debates of what works and what doesn't work. It didn't matter. We were like, hey, let's just take every precaution that we know.
Yeah. Because you had to too, depending on like probably your like governor or your state in Pennsylvania, like,
Exactly.
gave the rules and stuff. If you're in business, what you have to do. Were masks required as well in your services?
Yeah, we did what people felt comfortable with, and I still operate that way. Like some people have to wear a mask because they're immunocompromised, or we just do virtual.
Okay.
Still a decent amount of my caseload is virtual. Part of it's convenience, of not having to drive in and all that. Some are at college at like Penn State, and so virtual works out perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And then others were back in the office, no masks, just kind of, I'm personally vaccinated, but whatever that person's comfortable with, that's kind of what we stick with. And, but what's been so wild about the pandemic too, is, you take a lot of, well, everybody, regardless of whether your mental health is in good shape or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then you instill kind of this fear of, we didn't know how it transmitted. We didn't know that bringing our groceries in was safe. People would be wiping down groceries or leaving a box outside for a day.
We did that numerous times. Let me tell you, wiping it down with handy wipes is not fun.
I stopped the first month.
Yeah, but we did it for a month. Just about. Yeah. And then we stopped. But
you can't stop every bacteria.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
exactly.
Yeah, it's that fear, and it was really challenging as a clinician. Some people thrived in quarantine, and other people had a really difficult time. And I think almost everybody had a challenge in some way or another, whether it was spending so much time with their spouse or family, or just being lonely, not seeing friends, loved ones getting sick, fear, all of those, and more. But it was rather interesting to counsel through them. What was challenging is, when someone's feeling depressed, the best thing to do is go and do stuff. It's putting that behavior before the feeling, and it's hard without motivation and all of that. It's really difficult in the beginning, but then once you start to get moving, it's kind of like body in motion stays in motion, body at rest stays at rest. And, but it was hard because it was like, well, where do you go? Everything's closed. Well, who can I hang out with? Well, everyone's quarantining. And so it really tied my hands. Like, you couldn't even just go out and get a cup of coffee because everything was closed.
Yep.
It was like, and it was March, it was cold. It's not like we can just go to the park and hang out and do something. No. And so it was a very, very challenging time because you just didn't have a whole lot of control. You were stuck at home with family, and maybe that family, it wasn't a healthy situation. And it's like, well, I'm stuck there. I can't go anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can't escape at school. I can't escape to friends' houses. And so it really presented a challenge to be really creative, as well as like people learning how to tolerate the discomfort rather than escaping it. But then you have otherwise healthy people, and not that people are struggling with mental health aren't healthy, but that aren't necessarily struggling with a mental health issue. And you take away all their coping. You take away hanging out with friends, going out to dinner, doing activities, and it starts
talking on the phone or things. Yeah. All prices went up too, right? So that affects us gas wise. But I know exactly what you're saying with that. I also feel like a huge part of it was, even with you being, mental health therapist and everything, with your patients either coming to see you or scheduling. I'm sure scheduling was also a crazy mess as well, where maybe you were wanting to have a person come in sort of like this time, and like the time changed numerous times because maybe they didn't know when they were free, or you didn't know when you were free, and you had a lot of people contacting you because maybe they only wanted to talk to you because nobody else was out there, like they couldn't really reach out to anyone else, and you were the only person that listened. Yeah. So you have a lot of different, proportions you're pulling left and right, where you're just trying to get a better idea of the whole situation.
Yeah, just about every therapist right now is at capacity, or over capacity. I mean, it's hard to find someone who's taking on clients, and the moment that they have an open spot or open appointment time, it's filled very quickly with either a new client or a returning client. And so, if someone is seeking therapy right now or thinking about it, I recommend doing those reach out to a few different therapists, even see a few different therapists. It's expensive, up front, but it's great to see 3 different people for one session and see who you connect with the most. It's not just about what skills that clinician has. It's about, do I connect with them? Do I feel safe with them? Do I feel comfortable sharing stuff with this person? And yes, everybody, has their confidentiality and everything else, but
of course, which they should. They need to have that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really about like, who do I connect with the most? And, I might be the perfect clinician, modality wise, but they just didn't connect with me. And I'm like, that's totally okay. I want you to find somebody who you connect with. And then also who has the skills to help you with the need that you have. And so testing out a few different therapists to see which one you connect with best. It's a great plan. And also you might have to wait a few weeks to actually get in the door. So if you are thinking about, if someone's out there thinking about seeing a therapist, this is a great time to start making those reach outs to different people.
Now, are you seeing new clients, or is your office anyone seeing new clients, or no? Correct.
Yes, I go through ebbs and flows. I always tell my clients my goal is to work myself out of a job. So I want to help them develop tools and skills so that they can handle the issues as they come personally, and that they don't need me anymore. Even though it's really sad to see them go, I love working with them and building that relationship.
Sure. They have that graduation ceremony or something with you, right?
We do that final session, and of course the door's always open. I've had clients, that did great, and then a year or two later they reached out just to process something, and then they kind of graduate again, and do that, because our process of self-development is never really over. It's not over until we're dead. We're always working on ourselves, and or ought to be. That self-development is really important. But regarding the therapeutic process, some people just come in to work through an issue, or they don't even know what they want to work on. They come in and start talking about different issues, and we're like, wow, this is a lot of great stuff we can work on. And
then you communication skills. A better idea of which way you want to go or what you want to work on first, and then continue the path from there.
Yeah, and oftentimes the goals change and adapt and grow as the person grows. Like my goals might be this walking in the door, and then I discover all of this stuff, or I work on so many things that my goals change. They become deeper and more meaningful and more specific to what I'm dealing with in life. And that's a really special thing to see too. And so when I have clients that graduate out, then I have an open position for others. And so I'm always
so it's like open and closing. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
now I wanted to know a little bit of, if you can tell us about some of the adolescents that you see, just like an idea of who you kind of cope or help with, so they have an idea of who can reach out to you.
Yeah. So I see a variety of clients. I see anybody 14 and older. I don't see children, because that's a whole different type of therapy for children and youth. But yeah, I see individuals. I see a lot of couples. I do relationship counseling is my forte. I absolutely love it. I also love doing individual work as well, but couples is where it's at. Like that's my favorite.
I'm sure that's the fun part, because I don't know if you're that type of person that lets them like reiterate what the other person says or make fun of them, and put each other's in each other's shoes, and then switch, that type of thing. But I mean, I've seen that in movies and stuff, so it's kind of funny that you kind of get an idea or an opportunity to work with two different people. If you don't know who both are, then you kind of find out who they are in the communication.
Yeah, and I'll occasionally see them one-on-one as well, so that they can really speak unfiltered about things that they desire, and then bring back everybody as a couple. But there are times where I let them do their dance. I'll let them fight in my office and get to watch it unfold for 20 minutes of the 50-minute session, or hour and a half session, depending on, what type of therapy we're doing. And, the typical session for therapists is 50 minutes to an hour. But for a couple, sometimes it's nice to do an hour and a half, because you really have time to like dive into the issue, process, practice some skills, and then apply it to what's going to happen in the week. So it's amazing how quick that time even goes. But yeah, for couples, I'll let them do their dance, and it's funny. Sometimes they'll have an argument and they'll jump all over the place. The worst thing you can do sometimes when you're having an argument with your spouse is ask for an example. And because all of a sudden now you're arguing about what that example was. So it's like, you're like, hey, it really stresses me out when you do that. And they go, well, tell me another time that I've done that. And then you give them an example, and they're like going off on on another argument and they go switch topics 16 times, and I'll sit there and let them kind of go through their process. And 10 minutes later I go, well, it's been 10 minutes. What are you guys even arguing about? And they go, I have no idea. They're like, we don't even know. I
they switch topics so many times. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we work on the skills of like how to have arguments in a vacuum, how to have healthy friction, how to have healthy communication, how to build a foundation of emotional safety, so that you feel safe in the relationship, so that you can communicate. It goes so much deeper than just I statements. It's how do we work together? How do we seek each other's needs? How do we fulfill each other's desires? And while we can't be perfect at it, we can love each other a lot better. And so it's really special to have a couple that comes in that are at a loss, and the next thing you know, they're getting along great and loving each other and working well together and feeling so much better. It takes time. It's a lot of hard work for them, but they do great.
If they're in it for the long run, it's totally worth it. My dad has.
I had a real quick question. In a relationship that's open and honest, why do you have denial on both sides?
It's a good question. A lot of times we're not ready to accept truth or accept, how the other person feels. Sometimes it's hard for us to even accept how we're feeling. How many times do we want to like control our own emotions? And we deny ourselves, and invalidate ourselves when we're upset. And then you add another person in who has their own emotions, and we have our own issues. And then, this person that I love so much hurt my feelings, and now I'm struggling with that. And the person I love the most also can hurt me the most. And so then we don't talk about it, and then resentments build, and then we can be in real denial about things. So what's really important is, taking that time to reflect, taking that time to be introspective, on our own as well as within the relationship, and sitting there and really listening, not being prepared with my own answer or anything like that. Just sitting there and going, okay, you're feeling this way. How do I help you to feel a different way? You're sad, or you're disinterested, or mad, or whatever it is. How do we help? How do we do this in a collaborative way? It's not that you're mad and I'm a terrible human being and all of these things. It's no, you're upset. I'm your spouse. How do we do this together? How do we help with that? What can I do on my end to help with that? And you just kind of go from there. And it takes a really, it takes time to accept. It takes a lot of humility. Yeah. It takes practice.
For the denial because of that situation.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah. I mean, and couples, can be in denial about the relationship itself. They can be in denial that, hey, this relationship ended years ago and we're still here. And it took something to knock it over. The pandemic was a great example of that. So many affairs happened over the pandemic. It's absurd. I've never seen so many in my work. And it was because we had nothing else to do. People didn't, how else do we cope? And people were looking for emotional needs or whatever. And somehow
I'm sure dating apps came up a lot in conversation too.
Yes. Oh, 100%. And it was so hard to even do that because where do we go? How do we meet? All of that stuff. So it's been very interesting to kind of see this back end and in this intimate kind of lifting of the veil into people's lives of what they deal with on a daily basis.
So, Richard, before we talk about some of the additional training and what you've been trained into to be a mental health therapist, when people wanted to, or if they're interested in booking with you or any of the other people at your office, does it go by insurance for you guys to book in a therapy office? Like, how does that work? What would be like the next stepping stone for someone to book with you or somebody else at Newtown Therapy?
Sure. I can't speak for everybody at our office. I'm
or just an idea of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if anybody at my office takes insurance. Most, and including myself, are out of network.
Got it. Okay.
So it's out of pocket. But if you have mental health insurance benefits that are out of network, you can get receipts that you can submit to your insurance company for possible reimbursement.
Okay, but itemized receipts. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what do your rates start at? Like in a range idea?
Yeah, so I work on a sliding scale. My current rate is 130 per hour. And then hopefully you have some out-of-network benefits that you can get some reimbursement. And we go from there.
Okay, so it can range from 130 to something else, or?
Yeah, I can work on a sliding scale at times, especially when clients go through like a hardship. I can reduce my rate to kind of help with that. And then, especially like if they just lost their jobs, we'll figure out something that's affordable so that we don't have to discontinue care. And then it's affordable. Yeah, and then when they start working again, we go back to kind of the normal status quo.
Okay,
not every clinician does that, but I care so much about my clients that I would hate to see them not be able to work on themselves and work on the issues at hand just because they can't afford it.
What are some stuff that you kind of trained in order to be a mental health therapist?
Yeah, that's also a good question. And just before I forget too, I even work with a local church that helps supplement some people's payments via scholarship as well.
Okay.
Because it can be really difficult out there to afford therapy or afford going to the doctors and all of that stuff. So there are options out there. If you have a local church or something of that nature, sometimes they'd be happy to help supplement that cost. So there are options out there. Especially if it's expensive for you. But yeah, and in regards to training, so you have to have your undergrad. It doesn't necessarily have to be in psychology. Mine was, which I think is so beneficial. But you go through a master's program, and that's 2 years. And you do a third year with additional classes and an internship and practicum for the licensure track, which I did. So I did a 3-year program.
Okay.
That included an internship. And then you have to accumulate a specific number of hours after the fact, take a boards exam, and have specific types of supervision after the fact to then get your license. And so I'm in the process of that and almost finished, which is really nice too. I think it's about 3,000 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Is
So
that
a couple years.
Or with patients, or is that just counting when you clock in and out as well? Is that like all hours combined?
Yes and no. You have to have a specific amount of direct hours, so seeing a client face to face, and then some are behind the scenes, like research, trainings, that kind of stuff that can count. And I'm always pursuing more trainings and in different specialties and things. There's just so much out there to learn, and that also increases the toolkit that I have for clients when I meet with them.
Okay, that's what I was asking about. Some of the stuff that you are specifically trained in. Like the exposure and responsive prevention to treat anxiety?
Yeah, so exposure and response prevention, EXRP, it's a phenomenal modality. It's really used to treat anxiety, OCD, and phobias. And it's really about kind of just confronting the thing that's making us anxious. It's about distress tolerance, not so much about making the anxiety go away. So your anxiety about something might be here, and your tolerance for it's down here. So you're feeling really anxious. And what we do is we put ourselves in a situation that is anxious, or anxiety producing rather, and we start to build that tolerance. And then all of a sudden my tolerance gets higher and higher, and I'm not so anxious doing it anymore. So it works for like social anxiety to, OCD, intrusive thoughts, even fear of heights. Fear of death, all of those type of things. And it's a really methodical kind of structured therapy in some ways, but it's also very fluid. And it can be as simple as, just pull your phone out and send that text that you're nervous about sending, all the way to, I can't leave my house because I'm afraid of germs. And so we kind of work through that.
Oh, that last one. I think that hit mom. That's my mother. Oh my gosh.
Big time.
He said, I can't leave my house because of germs. That's like, okay. So I'm going to give you just a little example. So spider phobia.
Mm-hmm.
I am scared of spiders, arachnophobia.
Yeah.
You're not putting me by one. I'm not being anywhere near it because I will pass out. I hyperventilate and I will pass out.
Sure.
So what would your kind of idea-ish step be?
Tell them about the ballooning that's coming.
No, that's not
part of it.
Knock it off. What would your kind of next step be to that? Like, I know that's also a huge anxiety for me because just seeing them outside, even if I don't see them or know they're outside, it freaks me out. I hate driving with it too. So just a kind of idea, because you said phobias, that would be mine. So kind of what would be the next like stepping stone with that, or how would you go about that?
100%. And arachnophobia is a huge one. That and like fear of sharks, like, elevators, stairs, heights, those are big ones. Public speaking, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's
So
a huge
for arachnophobia, and that one hits home. I actually had a friend who had a spider in their car and freaked out and steered off the road and hit a telephone pole and broke their neck, and was actually a quadriplegic for a while, regained sensitivity and the ability to walk and use their arms again. And
God bless. Oh my God.
It's incredible. Yeah. He was very determined to get better, but it's amazing. And it was over a spider, and it was a small one at that. And so that's kind of like this component of, these fears kind of last on a spectrum. We can be kind of nervous about it, or it can be really disordering. And then it becomes really like a phobia. And it's like, oh, I check, the corners of the room so that there's no spiders in it. I check my car before I get in it to make sure there's no spiders.
That's me, Richard. Every corner of the house, I walk in before I walk in.
Yeah, I see a spider, I can't go in the room. So now
I have to get it. It's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And then I'm thinking about spiders, or I'm fearing them, and they're becoming a part of my daily routine rather than just living my life. And then my world gets a little bit smaller because, I saw a spider once in my car and I couldn't find it. Now I can't, I have to burn the car down and get a new one. Yeah. Or the spider goes under the couch, and it's like, all right, well, we got to burn the house down, and right. And start fresh, because it's terrifying. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that increases the how disordering is it to my life. And so what EXRP is really great for is what we would do. It's specific for each person, even if they have the same fear. It's not a one size necessarily fits all, but we start small. We might even start with imagining what it would be like to have a spider in the room and not do anything about it. Right. So we just start with even just imagining it. We start just talking about it, because we're taking something that is scary and in the deep part of our minds, and we're talking about it. We're putting it on the table to interact with it, kind of like clay and making a pot. It's like the same idea. We're getting our hands dirty. We're talking about it. And
oh my God, I'm crying right now.
Yeah, just thinking about it, of course. So we start slow and we talk about it. And the more we talk about it, it tends to help desensitize us a little bit. And then we start imagining what that's like. And we go through that process. And this could be many, many sessions, of course. And, it depends on how the client responds. And eventually we'll work our way up to, I don't have to check my car for spiders anymore. I'm feeling more comfortable. Ideally, depending on your goals, it could go as extreme as, hey, I saw a spider in my room and I did nothing about it. And now he's my friend, and he stays in his corner and I stay in my corner. And I don't have, and my anxiety, I had a little anxiety, but I feel rather okay about it, to the point, or hey, I want to get to a point where I'm so comfortable that I can hold a spider in my hand. And and that's what I love. I love about that. A lot of times, when we think of that end goal, it seems impossible, but then we work through it and get to a point where it's like, wow, I'm just not that anxious about it anymore. Like, this is incredible. So I've had clients that were afraid to get in a swimming pool because of sharks, and we worked through it. And now they can swim in the ocean, not worried about it. Or they were afraid they would get kidnapped if they didn't check their back seat. Or, we've
they've been watching a lot of horror movies with that.
Yeah.
Or Lifetime. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but yes, I'm sure that I didn't even know that would be a fear, but you're right. Yeah. It's scary. It also depends on the area you live in. Like, I mean, you'd always want to check, but gotta feel more comfortable with that.
Oh, 100%. And it got to the point where, for them, it was, if I don't check the back seat, I will get kidnapped, rather than I check the back seat to be safe. That's more of that normal range. Mm-hmm. They were to the point where, like, if I don't check the back seat, I'm convinced that I will get kidnapped. And it's making that fear or that feeling feel like reality, because it feels so strongly. And so we want to kind of work on breaking that sensation of, just because something can happen, it will happen, and bring it back to, it is a possibility, but I don't have to fall into this trap of, following what my anxiety says. I can live my life still.
Okay.
And so it's really working on those components, tolerating the anxiety, and accepting reality as well. That bad things do happen and they can happen, but my life doesn't have to be controlled by that.
What about dialectical behavioral therapy?
Yeah, so that's also another great one. It was actually developed to treat borderline personality disorder, but it has a lot of uses, and it's really it's a bit about distress tolerance. It's also very much accepting and learning how to cope. So it's a lot of sensory things like breathing techniques. It's also kind of accepting a dichotomy where two things that are opposite can still be true at the same time. Like I can be happy and sad at the same time. It's kind of like learning how to make my emotional mind also a wise mind, so that I can, sit in discomfort and know that I'll survive it. And also kind of like how to handle rationalities, really how to kind of dive into my emotions in a deeper way and tolerate that. So that's a really great therapy as well. And there's so much more that I could go into, but that's really kind of like the main concept of it.
Does that help with anyone being bipolar as well? Is that what you're trying to say, or is that something completely different?
So bipolar is a mood disorder. So it means that our brain chemically has difficulty maintaining our ability to handle our mood, keep it from going too high or too low. Borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder. So, it's difficult to treat with medications, and it's more relationship based, versus bipolar is more of a mood disorder. But you can use DBT for really anybody. But it was created for borderline originally.
I wanted to know a little bit more about cognitive behavioral therapy as well.
Yeah, so CBT, that's a mainstay. That is like the go-to, and really it's about restructuring our brain through thought and behavior. So EXRP is under that behavioral category. It really makes the B of CBT stand out. It's like the doing part. We can talk about it all we want, but let's do something about it. And with cognitive behavioral therapy, it's about kind of restructuring our negative thoughts and our automatic thoughts, and changing the lens in which we look at our life through. So, we have our brain is really smart and also a little lazy in that it wants to process information in the kind of work smarter, not harder kind of way. And so we have these templates in our mind, and incoming information will autofill essentially this template and tell me information. But sometimes that information can confirm to me that, I'm not a confident person, or maybe I'm worthless, or some of these deep fears, or maybe, I'm not funny or something like that, versus reinforce a positive thing. Maybe I am funny. So it can do both. But it's about kind of reorganizing the negative thoughts in a more positive way, that something bad happened. It doesn't mean something necessarily about me. It just means something about that situation.
Wow, so it helps you try to become more positive in the state of mind as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. As well as kind of changing warped thoughts that are making me miserable.
Emotionally focused therapy?
Yeah, so that's a big one that I use with couples. You can even use it individually as well. It's really breaking down, if you've ever been to a deli, you know how they like slice the meat really, really thin, and they ask like, hey, do you want it like this thickness? It's like slicing a conversation down really, really thinly, by statement, and really bettering their understanding of what each other is saying and how to effectively say it. So it really breaks that down in this really methodical way, so that we can be understood, as well as communicate more effectively, and really dive into like how I feel about X, Y, and Z. Just
to like get a better idea of that. Why did you use the deli as an example?
Yeah, because we're just kind of like as a metaphor for slicing it thin. We can
just to like make it very like small, thin conversation for you to get a better idea of what they're talking about, or the person.
So it's really deep what they're talking about. However, there's so much more in the statements that we make, and it's really about diving more deeply in each statement and using that as like a tool to better understand each other. So they might say, like, I really hate it when, you do, when you chew with your mouth open or something, or they say, hey, you really hurt my feelings by what you said. Typically it's not as well put. They're like, I hate when you do that, or you're really annoying, or, something like that. Right. And we have to rectify that into what is really the desire going on here. And I tell you, marriages have been saved just by making it a rule to say, if I need attention, I just shout out, I need attention right now, or I need a hug. State your desire, and the other person, then it's on them to run over and give them a hug. Sometimes we don't ask for the things that we need, and then we get really resentful for it. And so EFT really,
or they think you can read your mind. That too.
Yeah.
Do you ever deal with anything like that?
Deal with what?
For instance, like you were speaking of a little bit before, if somebody was talking or they're trying to get a better idea, or you're trying to get a better idea of the situation, but the person was like, I'm mad because you didn't do this. And they wanted them to like read their mind and know what they were doing.
All the time.
You get that all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, how often do we, I'm sure anybody listening can relate to that of, how many things I wish if I had a magic wand that I would make changes. I wish my boss would, validate my work, or my spouse would recognize, that I did the dishes, or, I don't feel like they acknowledge something or value me, and it's like, hey, we need to talk about that, because you deserve to feel valued. And it's really important in a relationship that we do things like that. And we do it in positive reinforcement. I have a friend, and she hated when her husband left the kitchen drawers and cabinets open, and it would drive her insane. He would have like ADD when he walked into the kitchen, and would just leave things open and lying around and all that. And she got really tired of following him around and closing them, or saying, hey, can you go back and close all that stuff? So what she did is she thanked him every time he did close one of the cabinets, or he did take care of that before walking out. And the next thing you know, he did it more, because he was like, oh, this is really nice. It's nice
you got a praise for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How often do we get thanked for doing the dishes? How often do we get thanked for doing the laundry or something? It's mundane, and, we don't even think about it, but like, it's really important to acknowledge even the small things that we do.
Well, I have ADHD and Chris is OCD. So with that being said, there's times where when I'll be in his house, just for the fun of it, I like flipping everything on his bathroom upside down.
I love it.
As you could tell, he hates it. He freaks out, almost kind of feels like he wants to rip his hair out, and he screams at me. It's fun. But like you said, ADHD or ADD, it's just a thing that I feel like we want to try once in a while and just see if anything happens, or if it actually affects that person. Now I know it does completely, and I'm kind of told never to go in that bathroom because I still do it from time to time. But it's kind of the fact that I guess we have to try it once to see, like, is it actually playing onto this person? Is this going to affect him? Is he going to notice? No, he did not notice at first, but when he was trying to do his hair gel, everything was flipped upside down. So he was like, oh, there's something wrong here, So like you said, kind of with that, I think that was a little stepping stone as well, because I wanted to see, if it would affect somebody else that has a phobia or OCD or anything like that. So
yeah, and that's so important too, that you guys communicate, what seems to be bothering him, with his obsessions or rituals, or what is the actual issue? Is it a fear of germs? Is it a fear that something's going to happen to the product? And having attention deficit, you're probably just walking in, doing your thing, might forget to put the cap back on, and just kind of living your life. And he comes in. And
I
orders all messed
leave
up.
the doors open. I do everything that your one friend guy does, because I feel like with ADHD, sometimes I forget about that I have it, and I do everything. His room will be organized. My room is not organized. So with that being said, we're two totally different people.
Yeah.
And it's things that either affect him or either that affect me, that, we come together to just want to be a good relationship, and build together. So the strengths that we give to each other is what makes us grow.
Absolutely. And you guys, can be really healthy for each other. if you're embracing those differences and communicating about those differences, it can go really, really well. That breaks you both out of your boxes.
Yes.
And helping him to be more fluid and for you to maybe get more structured and that, you guys can play off of each other's strengths in that way and really love the fallibilities that you also have. So that makes an interesting dynamic. I love it.
So before we get ready to end, I'm going to end with a question that somebody had said. My good friend Lawrence Taylor, he says that he has performance anxiety when he's practicing bowling cornhole washers, and he would consistently hit his target. Soon as it was time to keep score, he tenses up. He said same thing happened when he was helping his nephew, Buddy Katz, rehearse things perfectly, showtime, and he's lucky to remember cues, pauses, or announcements. Is this a lack of self-confidence, or is it more to that?
Yeah, so performance anxiety happens a lot to people. We can do a couple different things. One is the best way to get better at something is to do it a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's kind of this like freeze or choking moment, in that in when I'm about to do the final score or make the final basket or kick the soccer goal or whatever that might be. Maybe it's I'm asking my boss for a raise, that kind of thing. Like we have to remember to slow things down, to breathe. We can do things on our own time for the most part. It's same with like public speaking. A lot of people get really choked up and then they stumble on their words and then they get even more scared and then it becomes really hard. And there's nothing wrong with just taking a strategic pause and collecting yourself and taking a deep breath. No one's going to be judging you for that. And if they do, who cares? It's about, living your life, taking some time, taking that deep breath, doing it as much as you can, practicing that as much as you can. Maybe if it's a performance thing, like, have people watch you perform more if possible. Put yourself in situations in which you have to do that thing. So maybe, I can't have people watching me score soccer goals all the time, but what I can do is I can have people watch me do other stuff. I can do some, public speaking or something like that and start to get used to that component. And then taking just a real deep breath, taking a pause and just starting there. Also thinking about like, what is it that I'm so afraid of? Take some time to reflect off of, if I mess up, I mess up. If I don't, I don't. Like that'd be great. But what's so awful? What am I so afraid of in not completing whatever this is? Or am I afraid that people are going to judge me or something of that nature? And really thinking through that, I might not win the game or something like that. And in regards to like confidence, it's the same thing as like patience. A lot of times people are like, I don't know how to grow this. Maybe God just didn't pour enough of that ingredient when they were making me, and
oh my gosh, you actually get that. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And in reality, we can build it just like anything else. I had a client come in and they're like, I want to work on my patience. And I said, okay, well, you're going to go to the DMV. You're going to go wait in line at the grocery store behind the slowest person, the longest line. You're going to go drive in rush hour traffic. You're going to put yourself in situations that require patience to learn how to tolerate that discomfort.
I have patience, but I don't have patience for that. Oh my gosh. Wow. You really do make them, test themselves because you have to see if they can accomplish it or if it's going to take longer for them to accomplish that goal.
No, it's more about just building those skills. If I want to develop patience, I need to put myself in situations to practice patience. If I want to be confident, I'm not just magically confident one day and then I can do all these things. I have to do all these things and that's going to build my confidence. We have to sometimes put the behavior first.
Okay. One more question. My mom is upstairs. She just messaged this to me. Is it common, the anxiety or the need to protect family or friends by doing rituals? Like she wants to keep the house, need to keep it clean from catching a cold?
Yeah. Like a hospital type of thing, a hospital environment where, everything is super clean so no bacteria can spread into the person. But at the same time, if your immune system's not strong enough, that's what they're looking at. We have stronger immune systems. So, I I was looking at like build you up your immune system more and stronger, so you don't, anything that comes at you, it doesn't really hit you hard.
Yeah, and if someone's immunocompromised, that it is really important to be clean and safe with all of that. However, if it is more of an anxiety or OCD related thing, then we can do some exposure work with that and become tolerant of that discomfort and work through it. And, I've done that with a lot of clients, and it can range from some pretty wild exposures to even really mundane things where it's like, I'm not going to wipe down the counter after I cooked, and we're just going to have to live with that. Or we get as extreme, we're trying to overshoot that normal a little bit because we want to get ourselves anxious, prove to our brain that just because something can happen doesn't mean that it will happen. So I've sat in my office and we played with raw chicken and then immediately just ate granola, with the chicken juice on our hands. And, we were joking about how sick we're going to get. And we were both fine. Yeah, we were totally okay afterwards, no food poisoning, nothing. And it's like, well, if I can do that, then, maybe I don't have to wash my hands.
Oh my God.
100 times.
I would like to say this off air because I'm going to be talking to you all night. But my mother is OCD, like I'd mentioned a little bit before. And the fact is she just washes her hands and washes her hands and washes her hands every single second she touches something.
Her hands are completely dry. And she has no oils from her hands on it. And she keeps washing her hands to wash her hands. In her brain, she's telling herself that it's not clean. So she keeps washing them and washing them and washing them. And the rewashing is actually now made her hands open where there's cuts. Yeah. So now the cuts can get the bacteria. Eczema. So she's created the problem that she was trying to not have.
That she still has.
Yeah.
Richard understands what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And, that's a common one. Clients that I have that come in with OCD and wash their hands a lot, it's a really easy tell. I say, hey, show me your hands. How's the week going? And, sometimes they're cracked and bleeding or they look fantastic. And I'm like, great. You haven't been overwashing. So it's, they can't hide that.
But they wear gloves. That's what she wears is gloves all the time.
Totally. And so, we kind of work systematically and work our way up. And, it's a really fascinating thing with OCD that, it's not really like a logical statement of saying, oh, my hands are now clean enough. Like I wash them once, they're clean. Yeah. But yet my OCD is saying the intrusive thoughts, the anxiety is saying, oh, it's not clean. So my feeling is so extreme that I believe it. So I say, oh my gosh, my hands aren't clean. They need to be clean. And so I wash them until it feels right. And that's kind of that ritualistic component to it with those obsessive thoughts because they're just coming in. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we really work through behavior to work on that anxiety and tolerate that anxiety. So we might do some contamination type things where our hands aren't clean and go from there. I had a client that didn't like when their hands were sticky. So, and anytime I do EXRP, I do my best to do whatever it is with the client so that they don't feel alone in this. I'm not going to ask them to do something I wouldn't do. Yeah. So we covered our hands in maple syrup and we had the whole session with maple syrup, got on things, and we just lived our life. We signed forms, we chatted with maple syrup everywhere. It was a pain to clean up after the fact, but
sounds like fun though.
Yeah, it smelled great. And
hungry.
Probably wanted pancakes. I would.
Exactly. And so we just sat there and had our session, and the anxiety was really high for that person throughout that session. And then it started to come down, and it was like, oh, okay, this isn't so awful. And then we washed our hands, and then I had them fill up a little Purell bottle with maple syrup. And their task, their homework was for the whole week. Every time I wash my hands, I have to put a little dab of maple syrup on my palm and rub it in so that I'm always contaminated. My brain's saying I'm contaminated, even though in reality, we know like a little tiny drop of maple syrup on my hand is not going to make it sticky. But my OCD is going to be like, oh my gosh, everything's going to be sticky. Everything's going to be ruined. And it's about living in that tolerance. And the more I do it, the better I feel and the less anxious I feel. Wow. And so it's kind of like the same idea, even with hand washing. I could go on about EXRP for hours, but that's just one example.
Wow. Okay.
And people get better really fast with EXRP. It's not right for everybody, but it's really nice to go from talking about a thing to actually doing something about it.
Gosh, well, my mother was one of your clients.
I'm sorry. It's about facing your fears, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're conquering your fear.
Yes.
And at the same time, you're feeling what you're going through.
Yes.
Doing the certain thing. So I understand why you did the maple syrup. I understand why you did. It's almost like when I was a Boy Scout, and what my troop leader used to say. He said, anything you do, if you think it will hurt you, you may be wrong. He said, so wouldn't you like to find out if you're right? He said, if you see, fruit on a tree, do you pick it? And I said, no, because I don't know if it's poisonous. He says, why not? So in his mind, he's doing why not, and I'm doing why. But at the same time, I want to know what's healthy for me, what's good for me, and that's poisonous. Mm-hmm. So he's looking at the other way, just pick it and try it. And I'm like, no, because you can't tell if it's poisonous. Mm-hmm. So when you're dealing with the fear of people, and you know that sometimes overcoming fear is the hardest thing to do, how do you deal with that? How do you know when to push them and when not to push them?
Totally. And that's part of that training. So I'm trained and certified in EXRP, and it's quite a long process. It was a 4-day training, as well as weeks and weeks of consultation, to kind of learn how to assess those things, how to safely do these fear confrontations, how to safely execute all of this stuff, and to conquer our fear, and do it through a process of processing, so that it's not just jump. If I took you and threw you in a tub of spiders, that's not going to be really helpful.
Right?
Yeah,
Richard,
exactly.
You can't joke about that crap now.
No,
exactly. So you have to learn how to do it in a way that's productive, and in a way that I'm that the client feels really good about it long term. They're like, I am conquering my fear.
That shouldn't be a thing.
Like have a spider sit next to her, and then just get used to the spider being next to her, not hurting her, not bothering her, and at the same time realizing that it's just an insect that's not going to bite you or hurt you.
Right, but also accepting.
And you're bigger than it.
Yeah, but it's also accepting that this thing can happen. It just doesn't mean that it will.
Right.
So what ends up happening with anxiety a lot of times is we're anxious about something, and this definitely happens with performance anxiety.
Yes.
What happens is something doesn't go right, and all of a sudden, or I'm fearing that it won't go right. I get really anxious about it. My fear feels very real, and so a lot of times then I have a deduction of, oh my gosh, then this thing must be real or must be true.
Yeah.
Or I fear it happening again, or I start to get really worked up, and then I cause it to happen, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then what ends up happening is we're avoiding the feeling of anxiety rather than actually avoiding the thing itself. So a huge performance anxiety thing for men can be, ED, erectile dysfunction, for example. They're really concerned about it, or, something happens and they can't perform, and then they get it in their head, and then it's really hard to perform moving forward because they're afraid of it happening again. And it becomes like the self-fulfilling prophecy. So they avoid the act itself, or, it becomes really scary. It can happen with public speaking. It can happen with driving. Driving is a big one. Like someone gets in a car crash, and then they're really afraid to make a left turn.
The PTSD from that, though, right? That probably.
Totally. Yeah. And there's parts where it's like, yeah, you know what? This can hurt me. This can happen, but I need to live my life. I can't allow it to keep me from driving. So I have to get behind the wheel and do it. And we do so in a really step-by-step process to start to confront that, tolerate that anxiety, determine what's healthy fear and what's unhealthy fear, and how to embrace the healthy fear, because our freedom's on the other side of it. And sometimes there's unhealthy anxiety because we're in a toxic relationship or something that is dangerous.
Yeah, or the depression.
Right, and so we don't want to kind of use EXRP if I'm afraid of confronting somebody that hurt me. It's not necessarily, that might not be necessarily the right course of action. So it might be get out of the house. Yeah. So we really have to assess the situation and who the person is. It's all very specific to the person, to the situation, what's going on. And that's part of why the training is so intense, and why we do schooling and trainings and consultations and things, is to learn how to,
it sounds like.
Yeah, learn how to assess that stuff. Because someone comes in with a problem and there's, a million different options of treatment that we can do. It's about finding the right one for them, and one that they're on board with, and that's helping them.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Richard, we are completely over time. I didn't even know if you have a patient later.
Thanks,
but
Richard.
I was going to say thank you so much for being here. It's so informational for everyone that was tuning in, for you that was, recommending all the situations and stuff that you deal with, with your patient, your clientele, and kind of how you can help a lot of people out there as well, which is really amazing. So thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And, I'm working on creating more outreach. So if you follow my social medias, I believe the link is below. It's Therapeutic Advice with Rich or Richard, depending on the social media platform. I'm producing more content. I'm working on getting that ready and posted. So if you want to learn more about mental health or even are working on your own self-development, I would love to have you follow. And we can go on that adventure together. And thank you so much for having me. This was a blast today.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Stay on when we end. I just want to talk to you for a minute.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.